As you move up levels in football, you will notice that players are making less and less mistakes. And so if you find you are constantly making mistakes in matches, it starts being a little more dangerous as better opponents can punish those mistakes. So if you are making mistakes in matches, do some of the things I'm gonna go over in this video and you'll start making less. That's coming up next. Hi there, my name is Dave and this is Simplysoccer. If you're new to the channel where I'm producing videos every single week to help you improve your game and stand out on the pitch. Now, if you haven't already gotten my free ebook Game Changer, please get that down below. It's a 50+ page ebook that's gonna give you different drills, techniques, and so much more to help you take your game to the next level. Now, without further ado, let's go over some of these things you can do to stop making mistakes in matches so that you can perform, stand out, and have a positive impact for your team instead of a negative one. And we're gonna start in reverse order with number 3, and we have to start with one of the most important, and it's doing consistent, deliberate training. Look, the more you are just working on becoming a better overall player, you are deliberately training the fundamentals, for example, you are putting yourself in game situations often in your training, the less mistakes you're going to make. This is why you can't just go to the pitch and kind of wing it and kind of go through the motions, because you're gonna bring those habits into your matches. But if you come into your training and you're switched on 100% and you're trying to play quickly, you're playing with confidence, you're practicing taking that type of touch over and over again, controlling it with every part of your body. You're doing things quickly as if a defender is on you, and in your training, put a defender on you. Practice those scenarios. You're gonna become better and you're gonna make less mistakes. Especially if you're making mistakes like pressure's being put on you and you're losing the ball, or you're panicking and playing the wrong type of ball or making silly mistakes. You need to put yourself in those pressure situations and do deliberate training around them in your training. Mimic, replicate game scenarios, and then if you keep doing that in your training, you'll be more than prepared when you come into matches. If you've ever seen a player who just keeps making silly mistakes, it's probably because they're not doing that for the most part in their training. They're not practicing these situations, putting themselves under pressure. Don't be afraid of making the mistake in training. Put yourself in that kind of pressure, like cooker situation in training so that you don't make as many mistakes in the matches, right? So really focus on consistent, deliberate training, focusing on those fundamentals, focusing on those things you're gonna do very often in your matches, and you will start making way less mistakes. Your confidence will go up. So much will start coming from just doing that. In fact, in the comments, put I am focusing on deliberate training. Put that down in the comments. Remember, not wishy-washy training, not going through the motions, but deliberate game-like training. And we'll move on to number 2. Now, number 2 we have to cover because it's probably the biggest leader of what causes mistakes. It's the biggest thing that causes most players to make mistakes in matches, and it's not being confident. Look, even if you're deliberately training, even if you're the best player you know physically and skillfully, it won't matter if you're not confident, if you don't believe in yourself. If you haven't developed the mental side of the game, you are a sitting duck in matches. You will be a bundle of nerves. You will make mistakes that you would never make if you had some belief in yourself or confidence. And confidence, like anything you do with the ball, and you don't do confidence with the ball, but anything you do with the ball like that, you can build confidence as a skill. It can be worked on. You work on it deliberately and you will get better. I have a course on this you can look at. There are many other things out there. As you train more and more consistently, you'll also become more confident as you keep doing the thing over and over again. Repetition does build confidence to a certain level, but you have to work on this. If you've been avoiding this, it's something you need to look at, and not just look at, but really work on. You look at a lot of the great athletes of any sport, and they all did this. They all had such strong mental attributes. That didn't just happen. They weren't just born with those attributes, they developed them. And if you want to stop making mistakes and you also want to stand out, you want to have the confidence to really take risks and do things and have an impact positively in your matches, you need to develop the mental side of the game. If you're enjoying this video so far or it resonates with you, please hit that like button and we'll move on to number 1. And number 1 is understanding it's normal to brush off mistakes in the moment and then to take it into your training and work specifically on whatever it is you're making mistakes on. You're gonna have general type of training where you're working on the fundamentals, and that might knock most of the kinks out of your game and a lot of the mistakes. But if you're making a very specific mistake, or you find yourself in a very specific situation where you keep not getting the edge on the opposition in that situation, you keep making a mistake, or you're not able to take advantage of that situation, you need to identify that and start working on that again deliberately. deliberately. Now, there's two parts to this, like I said. The first is if you're making mistakes in matches, it does not serve you to beat yourself up in that moment. You need to learn how to brush it off. Every player makes mistakes in matches. If a player doesn't make a single mistake in a match, it's usually considered a godlike performance, a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 for the most part, unless it's like something very specific position where that's just mainly what they're supposed to do. But if you're a striker, for example, and never make a mistake, you've probably had a phenomenal performance. So don't worry, you will make mistakes. It's about brushing it off. You will miss chances. You will lose the ball. You will do something where maybe the opposition just pressed you well and it's more they did a good job than you did a bad job, right? Things will happen. Understand that you want to be able to brush it off and get it out of your mind very quickly, not to the point where you make it again, but not to the point where you're not beating yourself up in the moment. Brush those off quickly and then identify after the game, what were the mistakes I made, what situations did I struggle in, and then bring that into your training. Again, if you're deliberately training, especially the fundamentals and those kinds of things, you're already going to knock a lot of the kinks out. For example, you'll be training passing and receiving. A lot of players, they don't work on this enough, and so they end up taking bad touches, or they play bad balls, or they do things like that and make mistakes in that way. If you're doing the deliberate training we went over in the first one, then you won't have to worry too much about that. That's being taken care of. But let's say you're a winger and every time you go to take on the outside back, you'll lose the ball. Well, train that scenario specifically, because as a winger, you want to be pretty good at that. Or let's say your crossing is atrocious as a wide player. Well, that's not a fundamental necessarily crossing, but it's something you're probably going to want to work on. You've identified it as a weakness and a mistake and something that if you worked on it, you would have way more of an impact. So you take that, brush it off in the moment in the game because there's nothing you can do about it except do your best. But then take it into your training, work on this area, and you'll stop making mistakes as much. You'll get better at it. It'll start to become a strength versus a weakness. All right, guys, so those are some of the things you can do if you're starting to make mistakes in matches. This is very simple, and it's probably stuff you've heard me say before, but it will work if you actually apply it. 3 simple things to do, but if you do all of these things, you continually work on it, just do your best every single time while continuing to progress and continuing to stay consistent with it, you will see that you're making less and less mistakes. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and I'll see you in the next one.